Do you have a large family and you're tired of taking two cars everywhere? You could use a vehicle sitting 8 people, but you don't want a van and you don't live in America. I know I'm narrowing down the criteria here, but it seems that the Land Rover Defender 130 should be on your shopping list. So let me show you why.
A word of explanation. In this review I will focus on the third row of seats, which is a feature that puts the Defender 130 in the same league as some of larger SUVs, available mainly in the US and the Middle East. If you'd like to know more about what the Defender is like to drive on and off-road, watch my reviews of the Defender 90, 110 and 110 hardtop, links in the video description. The Land Rover Defender is available in 3 body lengths: 90, 110 and 130, a reference to the original Defender naming scheme, which was derived from the 3 wheelbase lengths. First, it was either 90 or 110 inches. Later, a 127-inch wheelbase specialty model was developed, but since 127 doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, the model was renamed 130, even though the wheelbase was really 127 inches. Today, the 90, 110 and 130 are just a general indication of size. 90 is the short wheelbase Defender with 259 centimeters or 102 inches wheelbase. The 110 is the standard Defender with a 302 centimeters or 119 inch wheelbase. And the 130 is the long body Defender with 34 centimeters extra space behind the second row of seats, but with the same wheelbase as the 110.
The Defender 130 is almost 536 centimeters long, but about 25 centimeters is the boot door mounted spare wheel protruding beyond the vehicle's outline. But those extra 34 centimeters behind the second row of seats make a big difference. Let me explain what I mean.
The Defender 110 is long enough to be optioned as a 7-seater, but due to the location of the seats in the third row in relation to the wheel arches and the C-pillar, it was possible to make room only for 2 passengers. And that's with the second row seats slid forward to accommodate legs of the poor souls who drew shorter straws. In the Defender 130, the third row seats have been moved back behind the wheel arches, giving passengers more hip and shoulder room and making it possible to add a third seat in the middle.
The width of the third row at hip level is nearly 130 centimeters, which is not much less than the rear seat in the Toyota Corolla and much more than in the Toyota Yaris, which is a 5-seater. According to the homologation, so 3 people should fit in the back there.
I invited my neighbors into the third row, a mom with 2 kids, and then we swapped the kids for a dad, and I added my partner Anna as a chaperone. Even with the second row all the way back, the third row adults have legroom, although they are touching the backrests with their knees. With the second row seats slid about halfway forward, passengers up to about 180 centimeters tall will have good legroom in the third row. The problem is how high the floor is in relation to the seats, because the third row passengers end up having their thighs up in the air. In the long run, that's not very comfortable.
Third row passengers get air vents, heated seats, 2 of them anyway, cup holders, USB ports. They also get their own bit of sunroof with a manually opened shutter. Access is rather for younger than mature passengers.
The Defender 130 has a total of 5 isofix anchor points, 2 in the third row, 2 in the second row, and 1 on the front passenger seat. So if your kids still need child seats or booster seats, there's a good chance you'll find an adequate seating arrangement.
Grab handles make it easier to climb into the second row. I wish there were some kind of handles for the third row. Unsurprisingly, there's plenty of legroom and headroom. The sliding seat splits. There we go, 40-60, and the backrest splits 40-20-40. The floor is almost flat. There are two zones for climate control in the back, with the vents in the middle and overhead, and these can blow into your neck, so direct them properly so you don't hurt yourself. There are two USB-A ports down here, a surprisingly small door pocket, or door pockets, but ample pockets in the backs of the front seats, and there is also an armrest with some cup holders.
The boot. Land Rover provides volume figures behind the second and third row to the roof, not to the window line, so I took my own measurements and there are about 550 litres behind the second row, instead of more than 1000 Land Rover claims, and about 160 litres behind the third row of seats instead of nearly 300. But with all the seats folded down, there is 1876 litres in the 8-seat version, or nearly 2080 litres in the 5-seater version.
An interesting bit of trivia, the Land Rover Defender 110 has only 179 centimeters long cargo space behind the first row of seats. Now this makes it unsuitable for emergency services because the stretcher will not fit. Only the Defender 130 with its 211 centimeter long cargo space is long enough. This is one of the constraints resulting from the exterior design having to resemble that of the original Defender. As much as I like this rig from the outside, inside behind the second row of seats, regardless of the body length, it feels like the drivetrain takes priority over functionality. First and foremost, you have to accommodate the four-wheel drive components, and that means that any storage space under the boot floor is shallow. And if you add to that the optional plug-in hybrid powertrain, you have to fit the traction battery somewhere, and this means that for a barn on wheels like the Defender is, the cargo space is always compromised.
For example, in the Defender 110 hardtop commercial vehicle I recently reviewed, the length of the cargo space behind the bulkhead was only 147 centimeters. In the Defender 90, the boot is not much larger than that in the 130 with the third row of seats open. In the 8-seater Defender 130, Land Rover decided to use thicker seats in the third row than those in the 7-seater Defender 110, and so a hump was created that limits the usability of the boot when the third row seats are folded down. I was later told by Land Rover that the hump will disappear and bigger underfloor storage next to the door will be introduced in the new model year. I also don't understand why the headrests don't automatically fold down when you pull the folding strap. This is how it works in the 7-seater Defender 110. Here, most likely the second row headrest mechanism was used, which also has to be folded manually. For a modestly equipped 100,000 euro plus car, that's quite a lot of things that you have to turn a blind eye to.
The cockpit is similar to that in every other Defender, even the commercial hardtop version. I like this dashboard layout. I like the legible instrument screen with various data display modes.
The infotainment system is the same as in all Defenders. I like the 360 camera with on-road and off-road, as well as towing display modes. Android Auto still works only sometimes. Sometimes I have to plug the phone in, and sometimes it works wirelessly, and sometimes it doesn't work at all. Under the display is the same set of buttons and knobs to control air conditioning and four-wheel drive. Everything is clear and easy to read. The door pockets are medium-sized, and so is the glove box. There is also a shelf in front of the passenger with an additional USB port. There are cup holders on the center console, some cubbies, USB ports. This test unit gets an optional fridge under the armrest.
This is the P300, which means a 300 horsepower petrol engine. In the Defender 130, it's still a 3-liter 6-cylinder mild hybrid. In the Defender 110, the P300 is a 2-liter 4-pot, and to nobody's surprise, it gets worse fuel economy than the 3-liter inline 6 petrol. Meanwhile, in the Defender 130, the 3-liter petrol engine should use slightly more than 11 liters per 100 kilometers combined. I'm averaging closer to 15 liters. If you want an economical Defender, go for the diesel. And if you're after muscle, there's always a petrol V8, and then you don't care about fuel economy.
Land Rover promises the Defender 130 P300 should do 0 to 100 km per hour in 8 seconds. I got 8.2 seconds. All Defenders which I have reviewed so far came with air suspension, and so is this one. In case of smaller models, air suspension is optional. The standard coil suspension gives you 228mm ground clearance. The Defender 130 gets air suspension as standard, and you can change the ground clearance from 218 to 290mm.
And like all other Defenders, also the 130 sails. The steering is very relaxed, so there's a lot of turning of the wheel to go around a tight bend, but maneuvering is surprisingly easy for a big car. The turning circle is 12.8 meters, 30 centimeters more than the slightly shorter Mercedes-Benz GLS. The BMW X7 without rear-wheel steering needs 13 meters, but with rear-wheel steering it turns tighter than the GLS.
And thanks to the 360 camera, parking is relatively easy as well. Just remember the boot door opens wide, so if you reverse park, watch for the information how much space you will need to be able to access the boot. Or you can park front first, which is also relatively easy. I tried.
As far as comfort is concerned, the Defender is more like the GLS. However, the GLS and the X7 ride and handle more like SUVs, while the Defender feels more like an off-roader. Soundproofing is okay up until about 120 km per hour. Above that, there is a lot of wind noise, but that's to be expected since this car looks like a pile of bricks.
I always feel very much at home behind the wheel of a Defender, and I'd still love to own one. However, I know I'd never be able to afford leasing on one of those. And Land Rover press cars in Poland have very modest configurations so as to prevent the media from scaring prospective buyers with exorbitant prices. Therefore, this Defender costs around 100,000 euro, but it doesn't even have adaptive cruise control. Prices of the Land Rover Defender 130 start at around 90,000 euro, which is several grand more than the equivalent Defender 110. This test example costs about 105,000 euro, and with almost 11 grand worth of options in it, it doesn't get adaptive cruise control.
In Europe, an 8-seater implies a van. Even if some people may consider the new multivan a cool 8-seater option, on the old continent the Defender 130 has no real competition. In North America, some SUVs offer up to 9 seats, so in order to stand out among European offerings from Mercedes-Benz and BMW, Land Rover decided the full-size third row is the way to go. And I get that. I also think the 5-seater Defender 130 is the one to get, even if it's not the sexiest looking variant of the British off-roader. And how do you like the Land Rover Defender? Which version, if any, appeals to you the most? Let me know in the comment section below.
If you like my sarcastic, down-to-earth and possibly mildly amusing car reviews, join me every Friday at 3 PM Central European Time, and don't forget to subscribe and like this video as it helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.